Hi everybody, it's Jodie here from Decorous Vintage Designs, and I just want to start off this video by saying a big thank you to all of you who are supporting and giving thumbs up and comments and whatever, you know, all of that kind of jazz to these videos. I do really appreciate it, and you know, you guys are great, thank you. So what I have behind me here is today's tutorial. It's a very rustic, bohemian kind of style piece. It's got a little bit of farmhouse thrown in there. It's got some beachy vibes. So yeah, there's quite a few things going on with it. So stay tuned and I will show you how to get this look. To get started with today, I have Best Dang wax in white and also just an old rag. I am actually going to start today by applying my white wax first. I'm being quite liberal with my white wax and I have a large wax brush, and I am just trying to get a very good coverage on there and, you know, applying it quite thickly at the moment. I'm now using my rag and I'm just wiping some of the wax off. As it stands, I felt like I wiped far too much of the wax off at this point, so I decided to go back in there and apply the wax again, and I was just experimenting at this point, having a play around and see what happens. In the end, I decided not to really use the rag at all, and you know, I just went straight in there and just applied the wax, and that was that. I will be using the rag a little bit later though. So by applying the white wax before I am adding colour, what this does is it means that the colour will kind of separate, and you know, it will make it look very old and worn, and it will just make the colours that I put over the top are much softer. Because Dixie Belle's waxes mostly are water based, the Best Dang wax range is definitely water based, and their paints are water based. It means that you can sometimes combine the waxes and paints together to kind of get, you know, interesting creative things. I tried the rag again here at some point. I don't know why, because it didn't work the first time, so I'm just going back in now and applying more white wax. Next up is Vintage Duck Egg, and apparently this is one of the best-selling colours by Dixie Belle, and I also have my oval medium brush because it's very easy to get colour on quickly and load your brush up with paint when you have a large bristled brush like this. I started off by misting the piece and applying the Vintage Duck Egg that way. I then get my rag and I start to give it a wipe down. Again, I don't know why I'm doing this because I didn't like it with the wax. I don't know why I keep trying to wipe things, but I went back in there with my Vintage Duck Egg and kind of decided to have a rethink as to what I wanted to do with this. What I actually decided to do was then tap my rag, so this is the ragging technique, and then this just created a great look. You can see here that you can see how the paint is starting to separate, and yeah, so all of this is just going to offer a more worn look. I just want to say as well, guys, that all of this was filmed live. I think it formed like 4 or 5 lives, which is a lot of time spent watching videos. If you want to get this look, I will link them all below though if you are interested, and if you want to see this in more detail. But I think it's just a lot easier to digest if the video is much smaller, so I've edited this for you so that it's a much shorter video to watch. Here's a little close-up, and you can definitely see by applying the white wax first and then adding the paint followed by the ragging that the paint is starting to look very soft and worn and pastel-like. Okay, we're going to bring a few more colours into this now, because as you guys probably know by now, I absolutely love layering colours and making my furniture look as old as possible. I've put some mint Julep in the crevices there, and then around the corner I started off with pine cone, but pine cone was just looking a little bit too rich and warm for what I wanted, so I replaced this with mud puddle. I put mud puddle around the edges. Okay, so yeah, so let me just try and explain in a very simple way what I'm doing here. So I am putting mint Julep in the crevices, mud puddle around the edges to frame the piece. I'm using my Vintage Duck Egg just to kind of bring that all together, and then I am using drop cloth, which is an off-white colour, and I'm using that to highlight around the pulls. So I hope that makes sense. What this does then is each colour kind of plays its own part. The mint julep and vintage duck egg are going to look like two colours that have been painted on at some point and are starting to chip away. The drop cloth is for highlighting, which is where the pulls or the paint might have worn down from, you know, touching and things like that. And then the mud puddle is basically just to frame the piece, add some depth and some age, because, you know, it's starting to get a little bit worn down. I am applying the same principles on, I think they're called windows. I don't really know what these are. Does anybody know what these are called? I'm going to call them windows anyway. So on these windows here, yep, the same principle applies. And then each time that I'm applying a colour, I am going back in there with my rag and I am just tapping, because I want to continue this kind of worn textured look. If you feel like the paint is drying too quickly or the paint is a little bit too thick, then don't worry, because you can just spray a little bit of water to reactivate it, and you can go back in there and do a little bit of blending if you need to, although I wouldn't blend too much, because you want the colours to have their own kind of space. You want each colour to kind of claim its little space as its own, so that they don't look too soft and lost. But yeah, a little bit of blending is okay, and then it will also help you kind of rag as well. Because I am doing this all in one go, what that means is that some of the paint won't have necessarily fully dried underneath, especially because we've got wax underneath that hasn't hardened yet. So you might find that some of the paint underneath pulls off as you do the ragging, or, you know, you reactivate with water, but that's okay, because this is going to be a very rustic farmhouse, you know, chippy look. So if a little bit of the paint's removed, then don't worry, because that's kind of part of the look, to be honest. And yeah, we're going to be adding more layers on anyway. Okay, so you can see here now how all of the colours are starting to build up. It's starting to look like the paint has been chipping off, and we're starting to build that very worn rustic look. Okay, so what I have here now is a custom made colour of, it's probably around a 50-50 mix of Antebellum Blue and Dusty Blue. I'm using a technique called dry brushing here, which is basically just what it says on the tin. I'm just putting a little bit of paint on my brush and I'm just wiping the paint off onto the furniture without using it in excess. I am focusing the Antebellum and Dusty Blue mix mostly around the edges of the piece, just to frame it a little bit more, and this is just going to add a bit of more of a pop of colour to this. It's going to make it look a little bit stronger instead of washed out. Yeah, and it's just going to add some more depth. Next up, I have a colour called Lucky Lavender, which is such a very pretty feminine colour. I'm actually just going to pour this out into a cup, just a tiny bit. I'm going to get my water mister and just give it a bit of a spritz, just to dilute this paint a little bit so it becomes a little bit runny. All of the products are listed below, so don't worry if you get lost. You can just refer to the description below if you want to know what products have been used today. I will also leave the links below as well, so you can get your Dixie Belle supplies through the links below if you're in America or Canada. If you live elsewhere in the world, then I will also drop the link so that you can find your local retailer. Alright, so going back to the Lucky Lavender, obviously, as I say, it is diluted, and again I am just applying this kind of randomly. I've focused a lot of it in the window areas, and then I'm just ragging, and I'm also alternating now between the Lucky Lavender and the Mint Julep, and I'm just using it in the same way. And then I'm coming in again with my Antebellum Blue and Dusty Blue mix, just to kind of reframe that structure that I had created earlier with it. because the Mint Julep and Lucky Lavender are both kind of similar toned colours, I just need something a little bit stronger to kind of just add depth to the piece, and so this is where this blue comes in. Here I have a stencil brush, albeit a little bit of a battered one, but that's okay, and I also have some drop cloth again. And again, as I say, this is all about layering and adding lots of different colours to this to create that rustic look that I'm going for here. So I'm going to create a patina with the drop cloth, and I am doing this just by getting my stencil brush and just tapping basically. I am keeping, even though I'm doing it randomly, I am localising it to some areas, keeping it thicker in the middle and then kind of thinning it out as it spreads out. The piece is now totally dried. I've got a sanding block and a 320 grit piece of sandpaper, and I am just kind of going to very roughly sand this out. This will reveal some of the colours underneath, and also I just want to gently distress some of the edges with the sanding paper. I want to distress this piece some more, and I'm going to do this by using a putty knife. It's always easier to mist the furniture or the paint before you scrape, because it just comes off a little bit easier then. The difference this makes to the sandpaper is that the sandpaper you can only really get, you can only really sand bits of paint off in lines, whereas this will just chip off small bits at a time or just random shapes and things, and this will just make it look more authentic and chippy. Okay, and it's now time to wax. I love waxing actually. Some people don't like it, but I think if you get creative with it, it can be really fun, like I have done here. I think I've mixed approximately 1 teaspoon of mint julep with 4 teaspoons of clear wax in the best dang wax range. What this does is, well, I'm basically going to put it everywhere, and by adding a colour to the wax, remember it goes back to what I said before about the waxes and the paints being water-based, so you can mix them to get creative things. So the mint julep will provide a very soft minty kind of film over the top, and what it also does is as it dries, because as the wax hardens with the paint, it will also crack a little bit. Okay, we're going to get even more creative with wax now and layer our waxes. So I have some Easy Peasy spray wax and some Dixie Dirt in Ash, which is a grey colour. I am spraying the Easy Peasy spray wax on in sections, and then adding my Dixie Dirt Ash over the top and combining the two together, and then this provides a base for the Dixie Dirt to stick to, and it just helps create a very soft kind of colour to then shade the piece with, and again just add a little bit more age to it. I am focusing the ash kind of around the corners and the crevices of these frames here, but just one thing I want to mention is that I am definitely not going to put it everywhere, because when something ages, there's no symmetry in nature, and there's no symmetry, you know, when you get patinas and you just, you know, just worn out things and things like that. So again, I'm going to try my best to be random here in where I place my Dixie Dirt. After 30 minutes, I am then going to go back, and if anything's not dry, then I am just going to give it a bit of a wipe off. Also, if you use too much, then you can just get your best dang wax, your Easy Peasy spray wax on a clean brush or a baby wipe, and then it's very easy to remove because you just wipe it off that way if you've just used that little bit too much. Alright, so I thought I'd finish this piece at this point, but then I got one of the new Silkscreen stencils through, and I just had to use it, and I thought it would be perfect for the top frames of this piece. So this is the new Dixie Belle Silkscreen stencil in Botanical, and it's got much of a Monstera fern type plant feel. Okay, so I've just got some cotton here, and I'm just dabbing the cotton onto the stencil, and these stencils are great because you won't ever get any bleed through, because there is a very soft silk, that's why they're called silk stencils, I guess. Like a very soft mesh. What that means is that you just tap your paint everywhere, and the paint will only go where, as you can see here, you can see where the paint is filling up in some of these gaps, and that's the only place that the paint will actually penetrate. Okay, as I pull this off, you can definitely see there's no bleed through, that I've had total control over where the paint goes, and it's just so pretty. I just really think this was the best finishing touch for this piece. And so this is the finished look and the end of this tutorial. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Is there anything you found interesting today? Anything that you might not have heard of before, or a technique that you would like to try? Let me know in the comments below. And yeah, and if you enjoyed this video, then also don't forget to give it a thumbs up and to subscribe. Thank you so much. Bye bye.